This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a discussion on Constitution status to the National Commission for Backward Classes. The participants are Dr. P.D.T. Achari, Constitution expert, and Aditi Phadnis, journalist.
Last week, the Lok Sabha unanimously passed the Constitution Amendment Bill, 123rd Amendment Bill, making the National Commission for Backward Classes a constitutional body and granting it complete powers to safeguard the rights and interests of the other backward classes. This bill was passed with all 406 members present in the House voting in favour of it, and this brings the NCBC, the National Commission for Backward Classes, on a par with the National Commission for Scheduled Castes and the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. Sir, how do you see the passage of this Constitution Amendment Bill and what does it mean?
Actually, there has been a demand for giving constitutional status to the Backward Class Commission. MPs demand this. In fact, it has a history. The Supreme Court in Indira Sahni's case had said that there should be a commission to take care of the interests of the backward classes. And accordingly, the government had passed a legislation in Parliament, the Commission for Backward Classes Act. But then the remit of that commission was very limited. They were actually dealing with the over-inclusion and under-inclusion of the backward classes. So they did not go beyond that. And the actual grievances of the backward classes in respect of the representation in the services was being looked after by the Commission for Scheduled Castes. So that was not an acceptable kind of a situation. So that commission itself recommended that there should be a separate commission for a constitutional body like the Commission for Backward Classes, which should be able to look after the interests of the backward classes. Now that the Constitution makes some safeguards for the backward classes in respect to their representation in services and so on, reservation particularly. So it was actually very necessary to have a constitutional body at par with the Commission for Scheduled Castes, so National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. So that is the background of this. And I'm sure that certainly all parties are agreed on this issue. So naturally, I think all the parties have supported this legislation in the Lok Sabha. And I think all the parties will support it in the Rajya Sabha.
So assuming that the legislation is passed and becomes a constitutional amendment, what does it really mean? Because different states have different categorizations of other backward classes. In some states, some classes, some castes are backward class, others are not. In a neighbouring state, for instance, there's a difference between Rajasthan and Haryana, there's a difference between Rajasthan and Gujarat. How is the legislation going to address this problem?
There is a provision in the bill which says that the President, in consultation with the Commission and consultation with the Governor, notify the classes, the castes, etc. in the backward classes. But there is a central list and there will be a state list also. So for the purpose of that state, those classes or those castes which are included in the list will be valid there in that state. Because we must know that each state has its own special social conditions.
Absolutely.
So naturally, that variation will be there. So in some respects, this list in a particular state will be different from the list in another state because of the difference in the socio-economic or social condition as well as the educational backwardness of these people. So there can't be an absolute uniformity so far as the list is concerned.
So what you're saying is it's not even desirable?
It's not desirable.
Okay. The point is that the fact is that OBCs or other backward classes constitute around 52% of the total population. That's a huge, huge number. That means 1 out of every 2 citizens could be from the other backward classes. So I'm rather surprised that this commission did not exist earlier.
Of course, this is a very legitimate question and a legitimate concern, in fact. That is why the demand has been going on for setting up a commission with constitutional powers and all that. Well, the population which comes under this category is very huge. And 52%, this is majority of the people of India, or the Hindus, come under this category. So naturally, this commission should have been set up much earlier. And maybe the political class, decided only now to have a full-fledged commission to take care of the interests of these backward classes.
So this commission will have 5 members. It will have a chairperson who is or has been a judge of the Supreme Court or High Court. It will have a social scientist, two persons who have special knowledge in matters relating to the backward classes, and a member secretary who has been or is an officer of the center in the rank of a secretary. That's pretty high powered. But the point is, what are the kind of complaints that one can bring before this commission? If I am a member of the backward class and I feel an injustice has been done to me in any sphere of life, I can come to the commission and petition to it?
This commission will address itself to issues relating to the safeguards provided in the Constitution for this class. Now, the safeguards are in relation to the representation in the services. That is the main thing. They don't have any representation in the legislatures. There is no reservation in the legislatures. So, their reservation is only in the services. So, the safeguards means the reservation in the services. So, mainly the grievances relate to that. And this commission will look after that.
What about reservation in the case of government-run educational institutions and other bodies which are run by the government in spheres of education?
Reservation in the states, I think, exist for these classes. Reservation in the educational institutions run by the government is there. That is there, I think, in most of the states.
So, all the socially affirmative action policies of the government will be, if you feel they are being violated and you belong to another backward class, you can actually bring it before this commission and it will address it. Last year, the Rajya Sabha had passed the same bill with amendments, and it had to be brought back in the Lok Sabha minus those amendments. So you have been a very close watcher of these developments, so I just wanted to know what the politics behind that last incident was.
Well, in the Rajya Sabha, the main problem was the ruling party doesn't have a majority. So naturally, the parties in the opposition would like to assert themselves and push forward some amendments which may not be acceptable to the ruling party. But then, since ruling party does not have a majority, naturally that was to be expected. But in such cases, from my experience, I can say that things can be sorted out if there is a discussion among these people. So the government can also say that, look here, these amendments, this may not be acceptable because of these reasons. Government can be very frank with them, with the opposition. And that is how things are sorted out in discussions. Only through discussions it can be. Even now, the ruling party does not have a clear majority, and even then, it's a constitutional amendment, so it has to be passed by a special majority. Yes. Total membership of the House and 2/3 of the members present and voting. So it's a special majority that is required for the Constitution Amendment Bill. And at the moment, they don't have it. The ruling party doesn't have it. So naturally, they have to discuss this matter with them and come to some understanding and avoid such conflicting things,
What are the specific problems that other backward classes face in our country? When you speak to people who don't understand Indian society fully, they are somewhat confused by what another backward class is.
In fact, the backward classes are identified on the basis of two criteria. One is social backwardness, that is the caste. The other is educational backwardness. These are the two criteria which determine the backwardness of a person. And they are categorized as other backward communities. Why it is other? Because there's a huge mass of Hindus who are backward. And apart from the three classes, Brahmin, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, all others appear to be coming under this category. Then there are backward classes people who are called scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So they have been brought under that category. And then the remaining communities have been listed as other backward communities. So backwardness is the common factor. So more backward people have been categorized as scheduled castes and scheduled tribes because of certain other disabilities which do not exist here among the other backward classes. For example, untouchability. That was the most determinant factor by which they were separately categorized because they suffered from untouchability. Whereas the other backward classes did not face that problem in that way or in any form. That is
but they still face backwardness.
But backwardness existed because of lack of opportunities. Social backwardness, that the Hindu society is a hierarchical society and it's a caste-based society. So naturally, some people are by birth backward. Although it is a very unscientific kind of thing, irrational, but still it exists. It's a reality, so we can't just wish it away. But social as well as educational backwardness, these two things come together. And naturally, if a person is socially backward, he doesn't get opportunities. Actually, he will be educationally also backward. And that is how these people have been grouped under this category.
There are multiple movements going on all over India. Don't have to make a secret of it, demanding inclusion in other backward classes because they claim that they are also backward, they are socially backward, and that they need affirmative action to bring them up to the same level as the rest of society. Will this backward class commission go some way in addressing that problem?
They should be able to do that. You mean people belonging to other religious groups?
Not just religious groups, also communities like the Jats, communities like the Marathas.
Well, yeah. You see, the point is social backwardness. Now, that is an identifiable thing in the overall context of the caste structure in the society. Then, educational backwardness. These two things should come together, and a person or a class or a caste can be identified as other backward class or community only on the basis of this. If he is socially backward in the caste hierarchy, if his position is low, and then educational backwardness, then they will be categorized, or they will be brought under this category. Now, naturally, the Commission will have to address itself to this problem because it is coming up in a big way, and it is assuming political color and all that. So it is becoming a very hot political issue. So naturally, the political class will have to take a very serious look at it.
In the context of some state elections which are coming up, do you think this move by the government to set this commission up is a politically motivated move, or is it something that the situation needed badly?
There is a certain amount of political compulsion or whatever is there in almost all the decisions. After all, a government takes a decision, we can say that it is political also. Every decision that is taken by the government is political. From that point of view, we can say that, well, elections are coming nearer, and therefore people can take that view that government has looked at it from the political angle also.
Also, I think the NCBC is probably going to have, or seems to have, the powers of a civil court while investigating or inquiring into any complaint. And those powers include summoning people, examining them on oath, requiring production of any document or public record, receiving evidence. Is this a normal practice? Does this happen in all such commissions?
If you look at the provision in the Constitution relating to the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Commissions, there also you will find these provisions. These are normal provisions, because unless they have that power, they will not be able to work properly, because calling for evidence and calling for records, and these are things which are very essential for a constitutional body like this to function.
Indeed. Given the fact that there are so many OBCs in our country, can you see the next step as being reserved constituencies for them along the lines of the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe constituencies?
Well, I don't see that possibility, at least in the immediate future. It's not going to happen. But maybe sometime later, maybe in the distant future, somebody may think about it, or it depends on the situation prevailing at that time, and the political class can take a view about it. Because nothing is constant. Things are changing and things can change. And after all, this commission has come into existence now after 71 years of independence. So maybe later, in some distant future, people may think about it and make some reservations. Possible.
Well, society is dynamic, and as you say, everything changes all the time. So the fact that now the other backward classes wanted to have their own commission, they feel that their problems are distinct problems of Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribe, that in itself tells us something about the way our society is evolving. You came to our studios and you gave our listeners absolutely invaluable information on Indian society and politics. Thank you very much, sir.
You were listening to a discussion on Constitution status to the National Commission for Backward Classes. The participants were Dr. P.D.T. Achari, Constitution expert, and Aditi Phadnis, journalist. The program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.